Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us again for the fourth in our Rebooting Your Business in Safe Mode webinar series. I'm Elena Campbell, President of the Rochester Regional Chamber of Commerce. I want to thank, of course, once again, our sponsors for this series, Brad Lambert with Lambert Law. Brad, give a wave. And Matthew Vazana with CCS Presentation Systems. And we are going to hear from both of them a lot from Brad in just a few minutes about the latest executive orders that the governor issued yesterday that I think we're all probably pretty excited about. But before we get to that, I want to make a couple of announcements. And you can see my screen here. I did send out about maybe an hour or so ago an update linking to that executive order, as well as linking to the governor's Michigan Safe Start Plan. If you haven't seen this, this is the plan that she laid out with all 6 phases in it. And so when she refers to we're in phase 2, 3, or 4, or 5, or 6, this is what she's referring to. And you might want to take a look at that and you can see what she's talking about when she refers to those. Another thing that I did want to point out, I was on a call last Friday with our state representative, Mike Weber, along with some other leaders in our state legislature. And the Joint Select Committee on the COVID-19 pandemic has launched this site where they are asking people in Michigan to please share their story. They want to hear how this has impacted families, your loved ones, your business, everyone in the state, so that they can compile as much information as possible about the impact this has had on our state. And I do link to that in my newsletter here. Take a moment to share your story, and there's a link right there where you can do that. It's very simple. It takes like 5 minutes. Well, depending on how much you'd like to write in the comment box, it may take you longer, but I already filled it out this morning. It only took me a few minutes to do it. I also talked in here about getting your PRP, your preparedness response plan, ready now that we're moving quicker and retailers can be open and restaurants, and Brad's going to talk about some more this morning. It is important that you have your PRP in place. He talked about it on one of his previous webinars that he did for us. We've linked to that on our website. It's also available, I think it was linked in our newsletter as well. And so you can be sure to take a look at that. We have decided to extend this series. It was going to originally be a 4-week series, but graciously, Brad and Matthew have agreed to continue with us since things are still developing, rapidly week to week and changing week to week. We have extended it through June 23rd now. So you can mark that on your calendar, and we'll be pushing out a new link, because this link won't work anymore. We'll be pushing out a new link. When you register, you'll get the new link for the following in this series. And then I also wanted to point out, if you have PPE or services that you provide that can help our businesses open up safely, there is a form that you can fill out right here. You just click on the link. And we would like to know what that is. So we are compiling these services and products to link our local businesses with other local businesses that can help you with these products or services. So take a minute. If you have PPE or any services that can help a business reopen safely, please take a minute and fill that form out. The county also announced $300,000 in grants for manufacturers that provide goods or services to help small businesses reopen. So that's another, if you provide PPE or services, make sure you go and fill this form out. Right here, I've linked to it so that you could possibly be eligible for some of that grant money that the county has made available. Coming up this week, we also have tomorrow our weekly member update conference call. We don't have a sponsor of this call because of the new orders that the governor handed down yesterday. Things are moving quickly. We felt like we were really going to need all of our time to hear from our mayors, our DDA director, and then our elected officials on, what's happening locally to help businesses get open quickly. Again, we're not getting very much time to reopen. So we know a lot of businesses are scrambling to get what they need so that they can open. So tomorrow we will be devoted to hearing updates about that. And then Thursday, the Oakland Chamber Network Small Business Town Hall is going to feature a healthcare panel. So we have the CEOs of McLaren, Ascension Providence Rochester Hospital, St. Joe's, and Beaumont, all who will be doing a panel discussion to talk about how healthcare has changed in this current environment and what are the lasting, what's the lasting impact that this is going to have on our healthcare industry. So we're really excited to hear from these CEOs. Margaret Diamond at McLaren used to be on our board of directors when she was at Ascension. And Chris Palazzolo, the CEO of Ascension right now, is also on our board of directors. And Nancy Sussick, when she was at Beaumont, Troy Beaumont, worked very closely with our chamber as well. So we're really excited to hear from the four of them on and what their thoughts are and what the future holds for them. So with that, I am going to stop my screen share and we will turn it over to Brad. Really excited to hear from him again this week. If you were on the call before we got started, you probably heard us chatting a little bit about how Brad gets to stay up all night revising his PowerPoint because the governor likes to make announcements the day before our webinar, which is great. We'd rather know before than the day after. So we just really appreciate Brad's time in slogging through a lot of these executive orders the night before so that he can bring us accurate information. So with that, Brad, take it away.
Well, thank you, Elena. And again, you're a model of great presentation and preparation for this. And I appreciate the chance to address the, I can't share my screen yet, though. I don't know if I'm.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's my fault because I have to make you a co-host.
Okay.
There you go. I forgot to do that.
We'll get it up there and there we go. Okay. So there you have it. This is this week's presentation of the Rebooting Your Business Safe Mode, at least the legal aspect of it. And of course, Lambert Law is a co-sponsor of this, and we're very happy to have the opportunity to do so. I'm really pleased that we have all the participants we've had. And hopefully you're going to find this helpful and give you some information that you can take back and work with as we start moving to a hopefully a full reopen of business in the very near future. I'm going to briefly review the topics that we went over the first 3 weeks. Those of you that were here know that we dealt with the various topics that are listed on the right. And this information is available both in recorded form and also my PowerPoint presentations on the Chamber site, also on my LinkedIn page and my website, is my firm's website as well. These are the topics that we covered before, and we're going to touch on some of them again as we go forward. Now, today's topics are obviously the new reopening order, which was just issued yesterday, as Elena let us know. And the other information that I had prepared before the opening, of course, with employee files and employee leaves. And I've been dealing with some common misconceptions, which we'll address as well later on in the presentation. And yes, we are up to 110 orders now at this point. So it's an amazing, amazing tranche of orders to have to keep track of here as we go forward. These are some of the legal authorities we're dealing with. And now you have, these are still in effect. 36, 97, and 110 are some of your most important ones. 76 kind of important too. We might talk about that one in future presentations. And the governor has also referenced some of these other authorities that we've been dealing with throughout this presentation and the pandemic. Now, hey, did anything happen yesterday? I think we've got a reopening here. This is pretty much the genie coming out of the bottle order that we've been kind of waiting for. We're not fully out, but I think we can at least get a couple of our wishes. And certainly retail has to be happy, because now retail, as everybody knows, is resuming normal operations. There are limits, and I'll get into that in a minute. As the fact with restaurants, bars, pools, and all the other facilities, including parks. I think we'll all be very happy to see that yellow or red tape come off of the park playgrounds, so that the kids can resume some activities there. That'll be a welcome sight. Hopefully that happens. I guess we'll find more about that tomorrow. And one thing I've noted in this order, it's a lot simpler, frankly, because we're getting to the end game here. I mean, now it's just a matter of who's open and who's closed. We're getting away from some of the more vociferous type of restrictions that apply to everybody, and we're getting more into, okay, you get to open, you're not opening, and we're really down to a precious few who cannot reopen yet at this point. And they're listed here. Now, the social gatherings, obviously, you're all familiar with the numbers. Now, it's up to 10 people indoors that are allowed by the governor's orders in fairly close proximity. Obviously, social distancing, that word that we're getting more and more familiar with, is still applied to our gatherings. And what I'm calling the graduation party exception, we can now have 100 people gathered outdoors, again, subject to the social distancing requirements in any particular gathering. So that's a significant relaxing of the restrictions we've had previously. And you can definitely, one thing I noted, you could definitely see where the pressure came from, because I think we all saw what happened when the swimming pools got closed. Oh my goodness, you just had, it was just like one of those paintings. All of a sudden, everything's closed. And I think what you're seeing, I'm going to deal with this a little later, is a bit of byplay between the different levels of government. And that really puts some, I think, that puts some pressure on the governor to take action on the swimming pool front. And that's what's happened. Now, there's the other side of this. Which of course is the fact that there's still restrictions in place, particularly with respect to EO 97, Executive Order 97. The overall statement is still that you're supposed to work remotely, even in office, which that one really mystifies me. If you're opening restaurants and retail, I'm not sure what that's about, and I think we're going to need to get more clarification, because the way I read the order, at least in my first and second pass through it, is that everybody except the restricted businesses can open. So everybody can open, yet we still have this work remotely sort of guidance. And frankly, it's difficult to balance the two of them. And that's going to be the trick going forward, at least I think for the next week or two anyway. You still wear masks indoors in public and shared spaces. That is still the overall requirement, except for people who can't. And of course, as always, children 2 and under do not do so. The new term I'm seeing, and I think this has really emerged from the federal OSHA, is maintaining 6 feet of distance. And I want to talk about that a little bit because maintaining is, it's a difficult term to define in this context. What I take away from it is the order does not say you cannot be within 6 feet at any time. If that was the rule, it would have been very easy to say in the order, and that's not what happened. Instead, they're using this rather amorphous term that only a lawyer can love again, maintain. So I'm still going back to what I've been saying the last couple of weeks, and that is close versus incidental contact. If you literally have a brush by incident between a couple people, or they've been close to one another for a couple minutes, to me, you're maintaining the distance as long as you back off and you're keeping 6 feet of distance for most of the time. Otherwise, this term would have no meaning, and they would have just come right out and said, no, you can't be within 6 feet at all. And that's not what it's saying. Now, the capacity restrictions apply, and for retail, that means 25% of whatever capacity you normally have. And the restaurants, of course, are the 50%. I think a lot of restaurants will be going to the every other table sort of set up and other requirements that they're going to try to put in place. You still have all of the staging requirements that we talked about a lot last week in terms of having people stay 6 feet away. We're all getting very familiar with that when you're standing in line. And of course, the screening is still also in place. So all those items and staging requirements still apply. We still have to deal with that as we go forward, even though we're getting increasing good news, which is great. And I'm not going to go through them, but there's certain exceptions in paragraph 14 of our order, which I think are kind of interesting, but probably only interesting to the businesses and other enterprises that are affected. And of course, I've listed the businesses that are still closed, although I did note that gyms can conduct outdoor activities, I guess, on their facility. There's no restriction on that. So there is some activity, at least on that, even on that front. So that's all good news, even though we are dealing with some remaining restrictions here that you have to be aware of. Now, what I want to talk about a little bit, because it's going to be an increasing, and frankly, what I was planning on talking about a lot more, but I'm going to deal with a little bit here, is what you're increasingly going to be running into, and that is the employee leave issue. You are required to track employee leave that's based on COVID-19. You have to put up the signage and the notices. The waiting protocols have to remain, and you have to do these things to make sure that you're compliant. The leave may be unpaid. Okay, under Order 36, which I'm going to deal with first, the leave may be unpaid, and it may be deducted from accrued leave. But you can only return to work after showing COVID. The employee can only return to work after showing COVID 3 days after the symptoms are resolved, 7 days after first appearance, or they test negative, they actually go out and get a test, or 14 days after close contact. And one thing I want to emphasize, and this has been the case all along, is I'm talking mostly about medium risk businesses here when I do this presentation. I realize that high risk businesses have been at this for a lot longer. So mainly what I'm dealing with are the categories of low and medium risk businesses when we're discussing these issues. And yes, you can discipline employees who don't comply. That is still allowed. They have to come up when they're screened. They have to come up with one of the 3 reasons that are listed on the screening page before they can refuse to come to work. Now, the federal guidelines, I found this particular poster. I'm sure a lot of you probably have seen it. I think it's a pretty good poster. I think it really covers a lot of the issues you need to see, and it will at least give you a summary of what you're dealing with here with the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. So I would recommend getting it and posting it to, matter of fact, I believe you're required to post it. So you want to make sure you have that. And certainly, we all know the reasons for COVID-19. I don't have to go through those directly. What I want to get into a little bit here is what everybody's going to be really wondering about as we get further and further into operations, and that is the FFRCA requires up to 80 hours fully or partially paid leave, and yes, that applies to everybody. Normally, the smaller businesses are exempt from this. So there is, however, a small business exemption that I think is going to be of particular interest to those in the chamber because so many do have less than 50 employees. And essentially, the buzzword is written right there. It jeopardizes paying this leave, this 80 hours fully or partially paid leave, depending upon the nature of the employee. Paying this leave, if it jeopardizes business as a going concern, then you have the possibility of not having to pay the leave of the 80 hours. And I've essentially in the bullet points here listed the 3 reasons where that might occur. Expenses exceeding revenues. This employee is the only employee who can possibly handle this particular task in your business. And then one that's kind of related to the first item, business is shut down or inoperable. And then the unpaid leave, you can have that for any period of time. It's obviously a lot less of a strain on the business. And that will happen for the duration of the COVID-19 reasons that apply to that particular employee. And this is an employee by employee analysis for the employer. The employer has to be aware of the employee situation, not the employer's situation, indeed, or the company situation, I'll make it clear. to deal with whether this particular employee is or is not subject to a leave with respect to the COVID-19 reasons, as I'm calling it, for not showing up to work. If you have any question what those reasons are, I'll be happy to take the questions, but we have covered in the past, so that's why I'm kind of breezing through it. Now, the other issue that's going to be coming up is, what do I have to put in the personnel file? Okay, when I have an employee who's not showing up for work, my recommendation right now is to keep the screenings and the information about the employee having to go home or even having to work, keep that out of the personnel file for now. I think we're going to get further guidance on this as we go through. But right now, I'm not seeing any guidance. I've been looking. And frankly, I do daily screenings just don't fit the definition of the general definition in the statute of what goes into an employee file. So for that reason, I'm recommending you keep it out unless there's a disciplinary action based upon COVID-19 refusal to come to work. Then something like that can go in the employee file. And yes, we will be keeping an eye out for future guidance. Now, one thing I've been running into are a lot of misconceptions about what's out there with respect to the governor's orders. And one of the biggest ones, of course, is that, well, you just can't go to the office. You can't go to work. That's been untrue from the beginning. Certainly the critical infrastructure exception, we're all familiar with that one. And like I always like to say, I find the law a lot more interesting when you're talking about the exceptions rather than the rules. And the critical infrastructure has been one right from the beginning. So has minimum basic operations. You can go into the office and conduct your minimum basic, or place of business, and you can conduct your minimum basic operations. And no, you don't need your papers. You don't get stopped by the police to show that, oh, I'm designated minimum basic operation. That is not a requirement. That's actually specifically in the order, believe it or not. Another popular misconception I've been running into is that you must, and get a lot of questions on, is you must wear face masks indoors. Now, frankly, this myth and legend is much more understandable because it's so variable. I look at the example of, it runs all the way from the grocery clerk who's standing 3 feet from the customer on a regular basis to an office worker who's sitting in his or her own office, let's say 150, 200 square feet. Why in the world would that person need to wear a mask? Whereas the grocery store clerk has to obviously have a barrier or some kind of protection to keep them from being exposed to the constant barrage of customers, hopefully constant, that's coming through. And of course, we have all points in between, and that's where you've got to make your judgment call. See, it's easy on the two ends. Those are easy calls to make. So the real key here is whether you've converted your space into a public place or a shared space. And a shared space for an office setting, I generally use the example of a community printer where everybody's standing around waiting for their documents. There you've got a classic shared space. Obviously a bathroom is the same, a kitchen, the coffee maker. There you've got to exercise some caution, but again, they don't have to be 6 feet apart every single second of every single day. That's just not required. Now, the other one I'm running across quite frequently, and I actually put out a couple questions to Elaine and others today, is do you have to file your preparedness response plan? I'm not sure where this one comes from other than just an assumption. Well, if I have to prepare a plan, I must have to file it somewhere. That's what I always have to do. Well, no. I have looked and looked. I've got a question into Rochester Hills right now, Sarah Roediger, and I have found nothing on Oakland County. I found there's certainly nothing in the governor's orders requiring you to actually file your preparedness response plan. And I think what's going on, and this one kind of highlights it, and so does the swimming pools for that matter. I think what's going on between the different levels of government is a bit of game of chicken. Nobody wants to take responsibility for when you let something happen and somebody gets sick and God forbid they die or something very serious happens to them. So, and that's a real challenge for a business and professional owner because you've got to keep track of all the different levels of government and what they're doing on an issue such as this. This is a good issue, and the swimming pools is another good issue where they're passing it back and forth among each other. So you may find, like I did, okay, Oakland County and state of Michigan, they don't require you to file a preparedness plan. Well, maybe Lake Orion does, or maybe some health department in another city does. And it's really going to be a challenge it's always been a challenge for us, but it's going to be even more enhanced now as the guidelines and the requirements get closer and closer to us and impact more of us. And we've talked about this before, so I'll just do it briefly. You must require customer face masks. A lot of people think this. No, you don't have to require it. You're certainly free to say, no, you can't come in here if you're not wearing a face mask. But you can ask politely, and if they don't want to, you're certainly welcome to allow them to come in without a face mask. The compliance requirement is on the customer, not on you. It's on you with respect to the employee. The employees refuse to work. I already dealt with this a little bit. Obviously, they have to have a valid reason. So there's a bit of a myth going out there. All they got to do is say, I don't want to come back, and I don't have to come back. No, that is not the rule. The rule is they have to have a valid reason. And the last one, thank goodness, businesses do not need to track sick customers. We don't have to, there's been a lot of ballyhooing about that, but that requirement has not come out yet to be imposed upon us. And that's a good thing, I'm sure, from a cost standpoint. That would be quite an undertaking for most of us. Now, my preview of coming attractions here, we're looking forward to when the salons and the personal care centers reopen, I'm sure. And they're about all that's left. And one thing I'm very curious of, from both a personal and legal standpoint, is what is the fate of the masks and face coverings going to be as we go forward to opening? And there's actually several serious legal issues. One of the most fascinating being free speech. Believe it or not, making somebody put a face mask on is probably impingement of free speech. Back in the 60s, they had a famous case where they were wearing the black armbands, and that was deemed free speech. I find that quite comparable to making somebody wear a face mask. I think you're going to see legal challenges on that. We're going to have to track those closely. Plus, we're just going to have to see what the authorities do about the face mask, particularly indoors. Outdoors, it's pretty well settled. And also, obviously, not only will it be a free speech issue, but it'll also be whether it's too vague, whether it's too imposing, too much a restriction of other freedoms of the individual as well. As I've mentioned, we're going to watch the legacy of the super OSHA, the OSHA on steroids going forward here and see where that comes. These EOs, especially 97, is at some point going to morph into a whole host of regulations that all of us are going to be dealing with. And then finally, the happy part will be our standards for a full reopening. We can talk about some of the issues that arise with that. And particularly, I like what Elaine is doing on June 23rd, which is everybody, it's going to be kind of a roundtable discussion with everybody, sharing their experiences. I think that's going to be very helpful for all of us because a lot of this is new ground. And a little bit about Lambert Law. These are the practice areas we do. We represent a number of customers, clients, and employees, certainly, and also individuals in their various undertakings that are listed here. My son does personal injury work. I do not. And certainly, please feel free to contact us if you have questions on anything I've discussed today or any of these practice areas. And what I've added and what will be available to you is the executive order page and these other authorities that I've been citing. And I've added the Michigan OSHA because, again, I hate to keep saying it, but I think the whole thing is moving toward in that direction. So you better be aware of what's going on there. And Elena, that completes my presentation.
Thank you, Brad. We do have a couple of questions, so I want to be sure and ask those. If you have a question, type it in the chat box and we would be happy to ask Brad. So I've had to pick up checks from clients, and at 3 different restaurants, businesses, none of the employees are wearing a mask.
Okay.
So.
Is that the question?
Yes, required, not required.
Okay, so whoever's asking this is going into somebody else's business. Am I correct on that?
Yes.
Okay. It's certainly, I'll start with the fact that it's not the questioner's responsibility to report them. I mean, it is, like I mentioned earlier, the responsibilities of the people to wear the mask. You can report them. I mean, you're certainly free to do so. And I know there's a lot of discussion out there, and unfortunately, people named Karen have suddenly been subjected to kind of a misuse of their name, which is quite unfortunate, but that's where it is. So yeah, you can, if the questions are, can you report them, you can, but the question in each case is going to be whether there was any necessity for a face mask. For example, in a restaurant, obviously they weren't taking care of any customers. And they could have very well not, by definition, they were not yet in a public space. So if they were just in there doing what I referred to earlier, just your basic operations, it's quite likely that the face mask might not have been required, particularly if they're all just sitting in their different cubicles or desks or tables, wherever they were. So it's really, unfortunately on that one, I'm going to have to kind of defer and say it's a case-by-case basis, depending on the nature of the business and when the person arrived.
We had a discussion, I was on a call this morning with executive directors of large chambers across the state of Michigan. We have a call every Tuesday morning. And we were discussing actually whether or not restaurants had to require their cooks or their line prep workers to wear a mask. I was speaking with a restaurant owner last night that I picked up dinner from, and she said it's so hot back there, they're not requiring them to wear a mask. They would need a 15-minute break every hour because of the heat back there and having a mask, you know, enclosing their breathing. So we were discussing it this morning, whether, you know, they had to wear one or not wear one. We didn't come to a conclusion, an answer.
Yes. Yeah. I've had that same discussion with a restaurant owner as well. And, you know, I'm sure people are going to be bouncing back and forth because it's a problem. It can get 110 degrees back in those restaurants, or excuse me, back in the kitchens, especially when they're enclosed. And now you're creating a different health hazard by wearing a mask or even a face shield. There's even talk about, well, do I have them wear a face shield? And frankly, I don't know. I don't know what the effect of the face shield would be and how safe it would be. I think that's something we're all going to be finding out as we go forward.
Right. I wanted to let everybody know, I did post a link to in the chat box to the U.S. Department of Labor, where all of their workplace posters are located. So the poster that Brad had on the slide earlier, you can find at that link, as well as other posters if you need them. Another question, if we have a public pool in Michigan, how legally risky is it for us to open? Do we have to restrict how many people can enter the area? I have not seen anything on this. Also, do these rules apply to water slides and inflatable water rides? Food trucks can be heat hazardous too. So pools.
Okay, pools. Yeah, you can open the pool, and as I'm sure everybody's seen, particularly if you're running a pool, the risk of transmission in the water is, you know, minimal to non-existent. They just haven't found it. So I think in the water, you're pretty safe. And frankly, you know, I got to throw my hands up on that one. I don't know how you keep kids who are in a pool from being 6 foot apart. I mean, you just can't have a lot of that going on. And I'm not sure how that's going to shake out. All I have seen is that you do have to keep, I believe I saw something about half capacity. I'll be happy to double check on that. I do believe there is and probably will be some capacity limitations. So all I can tell you at this point on pools, because I didn't look at that one specifically, is look for the capacity limitation. I believe there is one, and you're going to have to make sure on the deck, the pool deck, I think, is going to be a lot more challenging than the pool itself. In terms of keeping people spaced, I know that there was something in the order regarding the 6 foot spacing on the deck. So you're literally going to have to be rearranging the pool chairs to make sure that spacing is required. And I'm going to take a look at Order 110 real quickly while Matthew's going through to see if I can come up with a little better. I'm going to make a note of that to myself and see if I can come up with a little better answer on the capacity limitations for a pool.
Thank you, Brad. Tanya says that they're going to be wearing face shields. So.
Okay. Is that?
Restaurant.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I think that one's going to be, you just have to play out and see if it works better than face masks, especially when you're back in the kitchen.
Right.
And may I add, sorry, I question whether a kitchen is a public place where you have to wear it, but you know, obviously if you've got two cooks standing side by side, then yeah, you got to have some kind of face shield under the order.
Another question. Are we required to wear masks when meeting with clients in an office or conference room setting?
Yes. Generally speaking, yes. You're in a public place, and I say that because you're in a public place.
So even though that's a private office?
Yeah, because it's a public space. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I mean, under the order, that is a public facility within a public space, as opposed to a conference room in their iteration of it, despite the common sense interpretation that you'd have. You'd have a conference room. Now, frankly, if you tried to spread it out in the nature of a restaurant, to my mind, it's worth a shot, but I'm also telling you, beware out there, because there are certain people who would say that automatically, as soon as you're walking into a conference room with clients or customers, you're in a public space where you have to wear a mask. You're going to have that certain interpretation is going to be out there, even though it doesn't make a whole lot of sense if you're able to space people out around a large conference table.
That's what I was just going to say. If you can space people 6 feet apart.
Yeah, this is where I think she's going to run into trouble, because like I keep saying, the deeper you get in the weeds, the more weeds you find.
Well, and I made a note too. So restaurants can have 50% capacity,
Yes.
but we're only allowed to have 10 people gather indoors.
Yeah.
Take your pick. Which one is it?
Yeah, I was just in a restaurant last week where it's just one big room. I mean, and believe me, if this particular restaurant has 50% capacity, there's going to be more people than 10 in that particular room. So yeah, this is where I'm saying you got to keep your eye out for future guidance, because these requirements are by their very nature going to be conflicting in certain spaces. If you have a nice restaurant where only 2 tables are in a room or something, well, yeah, then it's kind of easy to sort it out. But that's just not going to be the case for most people, in most restaurants, bars, and offices for that matter. So yeah, I'm troubled by the fact of having the face mask be required, but a literal reading of the order would require a face mask in the conference room setting, even with the 6-foot spacing, which I think is from a common sense standpoint, kind of nuts.
So another question related to that: if we are meeting internally in a conference room without outside clients, so your staff, I'm assuming, are we required to wear masks? Do we require our employees to wear masks when meeting with each other?
I would say that is a 50-50. I mean, certainly at a minimum, if you don't want to wear a mask, then certainly space everybody out 6 feet apart. But beware, there is going to be a reading out there, and we're going to be having to look for guidance on whether that is going to be okay under the new normal. I mean, I just got to, unfortunately, I got to tell you to beware on that, because again, this is another circumstance where it's just going to seem, to my mind, as a lawyer, I look at what argument can I make? And certainly the argument I can make at that point is that when you're meeting just with employees, then you have not converted that conference room into a public space. Okay, that's the argument you can make. And as long as but even though it's not a public space, you still have to maintain the 6-foot social distancing sort of thing. But if you can do that, it would be very difficult, I think, for somebody to say that if it's employees only, that this is somehow a violation of the face mask rule. But I gotta deliver this with a caveat. There is going to be certain individuals, the Red Queens I was talking about out there, who until we get further guidance are going to feel like, yeah, you do have to wear a face mask. I wish I could give you a clear answer.
You do too. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Another question. What about masks and distancing at charity events? Charity poker event fundraiser for a nonprofit.
Okay. Outdoors, not a problem. If it's indoors, which I'm going to presume for purposes of this question that it is, then yes, if you're having a charity event where people are mingling, and I'm just imagining what I've seen at most charity events. You did mention poker, right, Elena?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're playing poker. I just see it as a social gathering, and I believe if it's indoors, masks would be required.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any other questions? Did I miss anybody? No? Okay, well, Matthew, you're up.
All right, let me share my screen.
Matthew Vizana with CCS Presentation Systems. Thank you again for joining us. Take it away.
All right, let me find my presentation here. 1 second.
Oh, sorry, did I catch you off guard?
No, I thought I had it up and whatever.
That's all right. You know, while he gets that up there, I did want to mention, you know, document, right, Brad?
Correct.
So at our ice cream shop, you know, we're doing our employee screenings, you know, before they come in. And I've actually written out all of our opening procedures for our staff, step by step, literally step by step. Like I even tell them when they have to change the sanitizer, you know, hourly. Wiping down the doorknobs and handles of everything hourly. And they have to initial, when they do it, they have to put their initials next to it. So that I have, you know, I can show as a business owner all of the precautions that we're taking and that we are doing our due diligence to maintain a safe and healthy working environment for our staff and for our customers. So, Brad, any last thoughts on that? Because they're like Brad said, this is confusing. There's a lot of ambiguity and there are a lot of contradictory things. What's the best way to protect ourselves, Brad?
Well, I think record keeping is key. Now, I do expect, I think one of the alternatives there would be that this was our daily protocol and we were following it. And then you could basically check off June 3rd, June 4th, June 5th, you know, that sort of thing. I think that is a possible method of going about it. But yes, record keeping is your best defense because not all of us are going to get visited by OSHA or whoever else is going to be doing the inspections. But it's going to be a lot, like I mentioned before, it's going to be a lot like an IRS audit. Some of us are going to get inspected, audited, however you want to put it, and you need to be ready with your records. And if you have any kind of systematic record keeping, which I think Elena's is outstanding, frankly, in terms of assuring compliance, then you're going to have a defense because the only way, especially on a day-to-day basis, the only way somebody's going to be able to say, well, gee, you didn't follow the rules on June 5th is if you have somebody on the inside saying that. Or somebody who visited that said, gosh, it didn't look to me like they were keeping it clean. Well, here, the record is going to be an important defense. So yeah, I think that's a good way to go.
Well, and I think too, it's critical. I can't be there 24/7.
Yes.
You know, I've got to train my staff properly and I've got to have accountability to show that they are following those guidelines. And they have to leave that sheet out for me and I come in the next day and I look at it and I look around and I take pictures. If there's stuff that I see that was not done and somebody's initials are next to it, I'm taking a picture, I'm sending it to them. I'm saying, hey, you signed off that you did this, that you cleaned this, or whatever it is, and here's a picture it was not done properly. And I use it as a retraining opportunity, and I'm not mean about it. I use it as an opportunity of learning.
We're sure you're not, yes.
I mean, they're high school and college. For a lot of them, it's their first job. So I want it to be a positive experience, but I want it to be a learning experience for them to understand what it's like, you know, to have a job and what the accountability is. And particularly that as a business owner, I am taking these things seriously. and following all the guidelines. So,
Yes, and I think that's a good thing. I would say this, that the only explicit requirements for record keeping are the three items: the screening, the actual incidents of having somebody have COVID, and anybody that you had return. I mean, the three items that I've been listing in previous presentations are the only ones explicitly required. I think the record keeping beyond that is a good defense, but it is not explicitly required. But we're also all familiar with mission creep when it comes to these sort of things. So it's certainly a good idea, that's for sure.
All right, well, thank you. And Matthew has his PowerPoint up, so go ahead, Matthew.
The fun of technology. So yes, thank you for letting me be part of it once again. In addition to this webinar series, I've participated in a couple other ones with some different groups. So it's been interesting to see and hear various industries and talk about return to work plans. We obviously went through and did our own COVID return to work plan to make sure that we had that for June 1st. And I would say that even as seemingly as prepared as I thought we were and being involved in all of this, it was quite an interesting exercise to go through. So if you really haven't been planning that, please do spend some time on it and utilize a lot of the different resources. So CCS has been around since 1991. I'm the vice president and co-owner of the Michigan office here, and we work across a number of different sectors. So we're really seeing a lot, not only corporate office environments, but also the hospitality, healthcare, and education conversations that we're having in this return to work scenario. We do full design and engineering as well as equipment sales, do the installation, training, and then ongoing service. It's not just a one and done. We really work as consultants with our clients and develop those relationships. And our sales team and engineering team is there to support and really make sure that we understand that intimate facility understanding. So every person's or every facility business is laid out a little differently, and understanding that full workflow is really what we try and put into those solutions. Our national office footprint, just for a quick idea on that. We draw a lot of information back from our other locations. So talking about both work from home scenarios as well as return to work facilities here. Home office upgrades. In the meantime, you're still going to have client or employees that do want to work from home. We have pieces that can support that ongoing, as Brad had mentioned, kind of that casual or conscious, objector of returning now because I'm not comfortable. So there still will be work from home scenarios. And then considerations in the workplace. So beyond what I'm going to talk about from a technology front, it's been interesting as we've interacted with a lot of the other trades. So as you look at all of the areas of a facility, some of the things that are being talked about is furniture and reconfigurations and additional pieces to separate people. The interesting one that one of the webinars that I was on, they talked about was HVAC systems and filters in facilities. So those are things to keep in mind. There's conversations as you talk in the healthcare industry of airflow pressure and push through. And those are things that may be a consideration in your facilities as well too. So, but common areas, entrances, lunchrooms, lobbies, really take a full look at what your facility looks like. And the one that we're getting asked about the most every day, we've got a ream of emails in the inbox inquiring, can I get them? What's available? How do they work? So no touch temperature check tablets or the thermographic camera system. So there's a number of different options that are out there depending upon the size of the facility, how many people you need to process through. Is it a manufacturing facility? Is it a retail space? Do we need to monitor somebody remotely in regards to that? What size tablets do I need or locations of the camera? So we have multiple solutions. And really the biggest thing with this that I see is how are you going to make both your employees as well as customers to return back to your facilities? So as a business owner myself, we looked at installing these here at our facility just from the standpoint of we're doing everything we can to mitigate our risk, to show what our plan represents and how we're going to protect our employees and visitors and vendors. But then additionally, are you making people comfortable enough to want to return and do business with you? So I think that's a big part of it. Also, as we talk to people, the handheld temperature guns, everybody, well, I'm going to get one of those. I picked one up for $80. But the piece that people forget about is I'm going to have an employee that needs to get within 6 inches of another employee to take their temperature. How inefficient could that possibly be depending upon the size? And every time I have somebody come in and out of the facility. So from a hygienic standpoint, these no-touch solutions, it's kind of the plug and go, forget about it. I don't have to have 14 people touching a temperature tablet or touching a temperature gun, or somebody that's manning a post throughout the day. So that's really, I think, the biggest piece in regards to this. I'm not going to show the video here. Another one of the tablet systems, so multiple ways to mount these. They can be put on desks, they can be independent stands, you can mount them on walls. As we talked about, what's the reason that you would want to do it? I think pretty much that first line of defense. Do you want somebody above and beyond the COVID situation here today? Do we just want sick people returning to our work environment? So I think it's something that is really going to change long term. Do we want employees, whether it's the flu or any other type of virus, in our work facilities? And this is a very quick way to identify that and decide then what your next step in your protocol is going to be. And then other options in the workplace. So virtual receptionists, I think that that's something that you can utilize existing employees, especially if you're short on personnel returning back to a facility, rather than having that greeter at that front lobby that has to sit there to greet everybody. You can put cameras and deploy these remotely to other people in other areas of the facility. So we can still have that presence at the front door, but then I don't have to have a physical person sitting there if we're short on employees. Then digital signage in a workplace now. What do we need to communicate to somebody that is showing up, whether it's an employee or an outside guest? Because there are going to have to be different ways that we interact and what we're going to ask them to do. So digital signage is a great way to do that. And obviously, with things changing at a rapid pace, you're able to quickly update that. And then as we talked about the rest of the areas, is there a way to automate that entry process, reduce the number of touch points? Do you have automatic doors? Do you have access control systems? Those are all things that technology can assist with. So as we went through and looked at our plan, how did we mitigate all of those additional touch points within our facility? And rather than just doing the bare minimum, which I think is the way that a lot of businesses are possibly viewing this, are we doing enough to make our employees first and foremost comfortable, and then secondarily guests that they're going to want to come and actually interact at our facility? So just a few of the technology pieces to assist with that.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Matthew. We really appreciate you joining us each week and helping us learn about technologies that can assist. You're right, standing at the door with a handheld thermometer might not be the most efficient use of someone's time all day long.
Well, if there's anything beyond technology, so we have a number of partners. So we work very closely with a number of furniture companies, and they obviously have that new lineup of equipment that goes hand in hand with that. We work with other technology companies. If you're talking about cameras that need to scan 25 people at the same time. So we can make recommendations, whether you need somebody with regular PPE gear. We're interfacing with a lot of those individuals. So happy offline to talk to anybody and at least give you a referral or a recommendation to somebody that can assist no matter what area of the business you need some help with.
If I may I pose a question, Matthew? Can you go back a couple slides? I want to see that one, the one with, yeah, right there. What is that with the, I'm not even sure what that display is, but is that your, that's shown on the right above, is that your digital signage?
Yeah, so that is one example. There are kiosk styles, or you can mount them. So you could take an existing display that you have, so a 55-inch or 65-inch TV that's on a wall. We can add a digital signage player to that to repurpose it, and you can use that for virtual messaging. Most of these, that example there is a rolling style kiosk, but really it's a TV that's been oriented in the portrait mode rather than the landscape mode, and then put a skin around it. So you can set these up in a network. You can set them up where it's as basic as a flash drive, and you walk your signage over, plug in the flash drive, and then it will run through whatever messaging that you have. But we have a lot of different ways that we can kind of skin that cat, if you would, depending upon what area of the facility you need to communicate a particular message. Digital signage is really that new direction, rather than ordering a new pull-up sign or some type of a graphic to put over a window. You can do it now all digitally.
Really cool stuff. That's cool.
That's awesome.
Yes.
We did have somebody mention they wanted to create a free app that asked the COVID-19 pre-screen questions, but then they found some others were close to providing one. And I did put in the chat, we have a member of the chamber, Scott Garrettson, who is the co-founder of Brilliant Chemistry, has developed an app called Clear to Go. And I put a link in there to his app, and I believe that there is a free version available for small businesses. We are hoping to bring you a webinar on this technology soon. They're in beta test mode with, oh, now the name escapes me, a large tier 3 supplier. Magna. Thank you, Matthew. That's right. I connected the two of you, didn't I?
Talk with Scott, and they've got a pretty good program. Additionally, there are a number of free offerings out there. And I showed last week the QR code scan. We're actually employing one here at our facility. So take your camera on your phone, you scan the QR code, it asks a series of the questions, and then it saves it into a portal. And if it was flagged, it would send an email in to notify myself or the other person that's designated on our team that you have an issue. So it gives you a pass or a fail immediately. But number of free systems, and then there's some more robust pay systems that are out there, but much more efficient of getting people into the facility quickly. So I would take a look at it. You know, if you can get Scott on to do a presentation, I would definitely recommend taking a look at their application.
Great. And there's, Brad, I think one more question popped in for you.
Okay.
What about weddings?
Well, obviously, if you're having the wedding outside, I guess the good news is you can now go up to 100 people in a gathering. I suspect that'll become higher as we go along, but right now the magic number is 100. Outdoors, you're certainly free to have the wedding in that kind of population. I'm curious as to what's going to happen. I know there's a lot of controversy going on with churches. So if you're having an in-church wedding, I haven't seen anything yet, especially in Michigan. But I think you need to keep an eye out for that, because there's a lot of bantering going back and forth about keeping people out of churches as a form of discrimination against the right to practice your religion. And you need to really just keep up. As far as I know right now, you're still limited to 10 here in Michigan, but I wouldn't be surprised to see that change even with a legal ruling, because of the religious, the practice of free religion in the state being implicated. And I would expect that to extend to weddings that are being conducted in churches. I do
Okay.
have an answer on the capacity for the pool too. It is 50%. So that earlier pool question, as long as you're bringing in 50% of capacity and making a good effort to keep people social distancing, I think those are your touchstones going forward.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for checking on that. So that's the
Yes.
same as restaurants.
Yes.
So, all right. Well, I don't see any other questions in the chat box. Does anybody have anything else? Maggie is waving her hand.
I put all the information in the chat box, but I wanted to let everybody know that our Back and Better signs are in the office. So if you're interested in it, I will be delivering those along with a little goodie bag from us with some paperwork in it later on this week into early next week. So we will still be working from home remotely for at least till Monday, right, Elena?
Yes.
Yeah. So please utilize my cell phone. I answer my cell phone all the time. I put that in the chat box, or send me a text, or even email. Just to let you know, the Back and Better campaign is the Chamber's way of promoting area businesses that have established new safety procedures following social distancing guidelines and are ready to celebrate their reopening. We will provide material to participate and share your great news on social media, increasing your exposure and visibility to the community members. We'll give you a great sign that's really, really cool. I'm excited about that. And then we'll also give you a sheet that tells you everything to do. We'll provide you ribbon. So when you're ready to reopen, you and your staff members or your family members will tie the ribbon back together. The premises of this is the community coming back together again. We really want to promote that. There is no timeline on this promotion. So if you're not ready to open because you can't get your PPE for 2 weeks or whatever, just let us know. And there's a nominal fee, but there's also a fee for non-members also.
And you don't have to do this the day you reopen.
Right.
You can do it a week later, 2 weeks later, whenever you want. The point is to help make a big announcement that you are open, get you some marketing and social media love, just get the word out that you are open. So don't think you have to do it immediately. We know you have a lot to do to get reopen. You can do this at any time.
And it doesn't necessarily need to be brick and mortar either. You might be a home-based business. We have the pull-up banners that we use. So you might want to do it in your front yard. Yeah, with a pull-up banner. We're encouraging everyone to be very creative, maybe in a park.
Yeah.
No,
at a business that is open that you want
yeah.
to maybe partner with, and somebody that has a brick and mortar that you would like to highlight, and you can leverage each other's social media. So awesome. Thank you, Maggie.
Not a problem, Miss Elena.
Maggie and Michelle have worked really hard on this Back and Better campaign, and we're really excited about it. And of course, the point is, like I said, getting the word out about you, about your business reopening, and making sure the community knows they can start to frequent your business and use your services. So we're excited about that. So with that, we will finish up just a couple minutes early, actually. Normally this goes till 12:15. Thank you once again to Matthew with CCS Presentation Systems. We really appreciate your expertise and your thoughtfulness in joining us and sponsoring this and helping us learn about some great technology out there that can help all of our businesses wind their way through all of these orders and make sure that we're reopening safely, protecting our staff and our customers and our community. And of course, thank you again to Brad who gets to burn the midnight oil, bringing us the latest information every week. We really appreciate it, Brad.
Thank you.
And you know, I know it's got to be as frustrating for you as it is for us. You know, some of the things, you know, questions we just can't answer black and white.
Yeah, it is frustrating because, you know, we've grown up a certain way and it kind of defies common sense in some cases, but it is, you got to go off what we got. Yes.
Right. Yep. So thank you very much, everybody. And I appreciate you all joining us today, and we'll see you again next week, next Tuesday.
Everybody, thanks for attending.
Same place.